All right. So I'm going to take this and push all of our progress here. Make it SSH. So what I'm trying to do here is to take all of our progress so far and take it to GitHub. I'm going to share the repository link in the chat so that you guys can pick it up from there and go through the test, all of the content we've been working with. I'll not go with git init here. And what this does is to okay, so this was the git init as a code. Now I'm going to get not yeah, so I've personally been having issues with my Git locally, but I'm notwithstanding still going to be committing on my changes so far. I can say Git commit. Okay, so I've not done my Git add. To add everything. Awesome. So far now I've done my initial commits. Okay. So now that I've done this, I've pushed all of this progress to master. So you can see my changes are here. So if I refresh this, I can equally find all of this there. So if I come to the master branch, I find all our files there, right? So what I want to do also is to check out to my main branch and I do a git pull. Okay, so the issues about branches are different. I'm going to resolve that later. So I'm just going to go back to my branch, git check out. So what I'm doing here could be a little bit confusing, but a quick introduction to what Git is I was trying to so all of the content we've been working with so far, all of the materials we've been working with, everything has been on my computer, right? So it'd be nice for everyone who likes around the world, right? Including obviously, especially you guys to have access to what we've been building so far. So we have GitHub, which is an online repository, more like your data bank where we store code. So in real life scenario, when you're building applications with either as a solo engineer or you're working with other engineers, what you want to do is put your code on GitHub so that others can collaborate with you and you guys can work hand in hand together, which is what I just did. What I did was just to save the progress of my work on GitHub. Now to go into right, let's see. Give me a second, please. Okay. Okay. I'm just bring my Canva tab here so that you guys can see what I'm doing over. So what I have is what we're going to be essentially what we're going to be focusing on today, right? Which is um APIs, API request, request and responses, installing Cypress, and you know, taking a dive into basics of testing Cypress. I'm also going to add something here, which is uh manipulating the DOM. Let's say rendering responses on the DOM. All right, so we're going to focus entirely on this today. So we're going to start with the obvious, which is API testing. So API itself, right? So what is API? I think someone was brilliant enough to give us a breakdown of what API meant. And so I'm just going to go in and dive into the basics of the API, right? Also in the last class, we're also able to look at how API works from front end to back end and how messages and information are being transferred and received between different clients and servers. Right? Application programming interface is what API stands for. Right? Again, you don't need to know just 4 minutes, but it's good to know them because I know them today. So why shouldn't you? Right. There was a picture like that we used. I'm going to just try it again. So easy to explain. Uh, okay, I found it. Okay, so here it is here. So I did make it of this very picture then to say, what is an API? Look at the bottom here. So basically, today, when two computers are talking to each other, a lot of time, if not over everything's over the network core. Now you have a server in another place and your computer wants to talk to that server. It could be to log into Facebook from your browser or your phone, or you take your phone, you want to log into your Instagram account, right? There's an API call that takes place or API communication that takes place. Now look at your phone and your computer as a front end. This is the client, these are your devices, right? This is how you interface, what you see exactly with your eyes. The backend, you can't really see it because you don't even know where the server is, you're going to serve it. Not to talk about how the server is processing your request. So API is then what comes in between. So when you create a data, which is your email and your password, which is what we call a request in this scenario, the API itself, these waiters, they carry that information and they carry it to the server. They submit it and try it. So the server then takes it in and then look at it and, oh, this information is valid, this is not valid. In all of these scenarios, you would always get a response as far as your internet connection. So your response could always be either a success or a failure. It could also return what was it called? There will always be a pending state, meaning that there's a short waiting period. So if you notice if your internet is slow, you notice that when you click on either sign in or you make a request, you notice it takes a long time. So either your internet is slow or the server is slow, right? That's when all these the server is slow, the website is slow, then comes to play picture. That's because whenever you make a request, it takes a long time for that response to come back. And that's what we're going to be taking a look at briefly today, right? So now that we know um what the basics of this is, right? We're going to put this into practice, right? Exactly how this is going to work in a real life scenario. So we're then going into making a sample request, and let's see how that works out. And don't forget that we can always start our server here, especially with the fact that we have the extension installed. This go live would always be in your VS Code, so that's what I would expect everyone to, keep the eye on. So if I click on this go live now, what happens is the progress of what we did so far comes up. Now our local server is starting at this very address here. So let's go back to our code. Right. Let's create a new folder here called API. Right. And I like to always have something called let's call it requests. Request dot SFJS, right? Don't forget, all of this is still within the scope of JavaScript. So what we're trying to do, what's this file for? We want to use this file to make requests. Now, because we are in a singular model, which is we're using this CS file to make our calls, I would also even want to employ this very one, right? Let's use this very guy, actually. Let's use this here. So what I want to do here is I want to create a new function. Don't forget, we all know what a function is by now, which is from the last time we were with the greet user to my second function, my first function. So how do I know to create a function? Because I want to initiate something. I just want to store a data somewhere. I want to initiate an action. This is where function comes into play. So I want to call this let's call this fetch users. This time I want to get a list of users. I'm going to turn off my autocomplete. Awesome. So let's call this. Let's be very traditional. Let's go back to the old way of writing functions. Say let me start with a sync. Let's start with function. Let's say fetch users. Right. Ideally, our functions would have ended here. But there's something called asynchronous and synchronous. It's not just in JavaScript, it's in programming language as well. And what that essentially means is that whenever you initiate something, there's a waiting period. That wait period, we don't know when it will elapse. For example, make an API request. You cannot say whether you get a response in 1 second, 2 seconds, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, as the case may be. So because we don't know the time this response will come back, we have to wait. This wait and this whole process can only be achieved when you use an asynchronous function to achieve it, right? Synchronous means that there's no wait period. For example, if I initiate this script, everything shows up immediately. We can guess the amount of time it will take for an action to take place. For example, if I come here right, and I refresh, I know that within less than 1 second, so you would not even know that this thing is refreshing. If I do this, if you check here, you know that this thing is refreshing. Anytime I press Control or Command R as your keyboard could be. Now, we can estimate the wait period of this, but when it comes to asynchronous, because the data is not really dependent on you, you cannot dictate when they come back. This is why we need something called asynchronous function. And it's quite asynchronous. You can call, some will say asynchronous, some will say asynchronous. Honestly, potato, right? Now, so what do we want to achieve here? Don't forget, anytime you want to start writing a code, always ask yourself what you want to achieve, or else you just keep writing some things and cleaning and all, right? So we want to fetch users here. So there are a couple of ways we can achieve this asynchronous. Now, because we declared async here, it means that we want to get a list of users, right? There's something called, let's call it JSON placeholder. Now, this is a public test API that we can use to. It's a fake, as the description implies, fake reliable API for testing and prototyping, meaning that you can query this endpoint here and to just send you some sample data and test data to work with. So this is what we're going to be using. So for example, if I copy this URL, this to dos, and I put one, and I paste it in my browser, right? You can see it gives us a sample data. user ID1, title and description. So if I wanted to create a to-do list, I can come here to come and use my test data to do it. So let's take note of it, just in placeholder, right? So if we then come back here, since we want to fetch a list of users, let's look for users here. I believe that this are something called users or some, you can see. So if you want to use that, now you can use this sample data. So what we want to do is make a request to fetch this data and also have it in our application. So I come here. Now, ideally, I could start by saying, again, don't forget we need a constant, we need a variable to be declared. All right. So constant, let's call it response. Right. Response equals to now await. Right. So what's our variable name? I always like to, let's see, let me close this. If at any point you guys can hear me, you can let me know. I'll be sure to repeat myself. So I can come here within the scope of this constant, let's say URL is equal to now. If you notice on the day one of this class, we went through two data types, what a string is, what a function is, what a number is, what an array is, what an object is. It was very important for us to have gone through that so that we would know the essence of these data types when we start using them. You can see this URL here is a string. You can see I'm using constant because I don't want the value to ever change. If I use let, I can come and update the data later. But what's the essence of updating this later? I have no use case for it, which is why I have to do the constant. So constant here, constant URL is equals to the URL we want to call. I can just come here to say URL, right? Essentially, I have my response here. So what this means is that we want to fetch. Now this fetch, now you notice I just typed it out of the blue. This fetch users is my custom functioning. I came up with it. But this I didn't come up with it, right? It's embedded in JavaScript, right? In ES6, right? This is the way you can call or make some network request, right? If you put your mouse over it as well, you can see it's going to also, even your VS Code will give you MDN reference, meaning that it's inbuilt, right? So if you go here and you click on this, it then will open here and give you the documentation to what fetch is all about. So you can read more about this, but essentially what we use it for is to make a request. So I like to keep my code clean by declaring my variable false and then put it here. Now I'm going to also then zoom in. Okay, too much on that. I'm going to close this as well so that there's enough space. All right, so what we have here is that I declare this and I put it inside parentheses. You can see this fetch will always take an argument. You cannot just say fetch and just fetch is a function, by the way, which is why it has this bracket in front of it, just like the way we did it. So technically, JavaScript or authors of JavaScript came up with this as a function. Then to invoke it, don't forget that you only have to put parentheses in front of a function. So we come here and we then say URL, which is what it expects, right? Now, what is the value? What comes back? So what this means is that we have an asynchronous function, right? We've called it fetch users. Inside of it, we want to fetch the content or the data that comes back from this URL, right? Now this await keyword goes hand in hand with async. If I delete this await will be useless, and it's already underlining it because it tells you that if you want to use await, it means that you have to use it with async as well. So I have to return it back, right? So async await, meaning that all we're saying is that we want to always, whenever we want to fetch data that comes back from here, we want to use this fetch to do that, and we want to wait for whatever results. So if I have a console.log here, and I say 1 plus 1, don't forget that whenever we initiate this function, we expect to find in our log a value of 2. But if this takes 7 years to resolve, line 58 will never run unless this await comes back. It means that we will have to wait for this for any other thing proceeding to kick in, right? I'm using 7 ESD as an exaggeration, obviously, but 2 seconds, 3 seconds, maybe a minute when the word is ending, maybe, but less than a minute, it definitely would have come back. So the response, don't forget, can either be successful or it fails. Now, how do we then get our response? What I like to do is always, come here to say response. Let's even see what comes back whenever we call this. And how do we get access to this? What I want to say is to come here and initiate a function like this, right? Again, don't forget, fetch users, and put the parentheses. Because we don't have an argument, right? We're not doing anything because there's no argument here. Now, we can go back to our browser. This is very type precisely. Let's check our log. Inside our log, we should find, very interesting thing, which is response, right? And by the time we expand it, we say response comes back. This is what, this is the response that comes back from fetching this. Now you can see the body does response. This is an object, by the way. So that means we have response.body, dot headers, dot body use, dot okay, dot redirect. We have the URL itself, right? Okay, so because we're using fetch, right? Conventionally, you would find when you're using like in a much more advanced what's it called, project, you would not be using fetch. You'll be using tools like Axios. By Axios, I mean Axios like this. This is I spelled, right? But because we're trying to keep things simple, we don't really want to use Axios here. So now, how do we then get our data? Right, to get the actual data from here, this is what comes back by default. But there's a special item here, key here that, because a lot of time we don't even need to use anything. We don't need anything. Maybe we need the status. Status true on where will always tell you that it's successful, right? I'll come back to that as well. But what we want to use here precisely is called .json, meaning that we want, okay, I think I made a mistake here. Okay, you can see we have something called fetch. We are waiting to fetch then .json. Now, what this .json does is to give us the actual data similar to what we have here, right? This is what we want. Now, I like how this is already filling, right? You can see if we had, you can see that this is uncaught in promise type error fetch. This for some reason is giving us an error. Now, if I come here to say console.log, I'm gonna say 2 plus 2, okay, I think we already have this here. And I come here to, let me put it inside the function itself. Now, if I put it outside, you would notice that we see 4, right? But if I put it inside here, you would notice that the 4 is not coming back. That's because an error occurred before the log. Now, in this kind of case, how do we handle errors in JavaScript? Because if this error happens in real life, every other thing that proceeds this, that comes after this, will not work because there's an error at the top. So everything beneath it will not work. So to avoid something like this, we have something called try and catch. Almost every language, if not all, have this output as well. What this basically means is that you want to try something. You want to try because you think that there might be, just in case there's an error inside that scope. You want to try this, and if an error comes back, you want to be able to undo the error yourself. Now, if I come here now and I refresh, you know that the error is not coming back. Now, why is it not coming back? Because the error has been contained. I did not change anything but put all our code inside of this try and catch. Now, if I come here to put here, say, I have an error, right? And I come here to have a success. Now, You can see the only thing we have in the log here is I have an error. It means that there's an error here and it has been caught. Now, I wrote this try and catch so that it doesn't look like some magic. Right? By the time I try catch, because I'm used to VS Code again, VS Code automatically or brilliantly detects I'm trying to, I could be trying to write a try and catch statement. So it gives me this. So I press enter, what it does is just let me populate it. But the syntax is as simple as this, right? So I come here to look at it and say, oh, I have an error. So what is my error? So this error here has been passed as a parameter. So I can come here to say, comma, error. So if I then look at it, you can see it's not saying uncut error again. It's not telling me that I have an error. Let me even make it a bit more readable, right? Then it tells me what you have a type error because fetch itself.json is not a function. Just give me a second. Now, that's because this right here is what is giving us the error. Now, in an ideal scenario, we would have caught it, maybe should logged it, and in this case as well, by the time we have a success, we have this, I have a success that would log on. But
Someone said it's not saying anything.
oh, you're not saying
Someone
anything.
said it's not saying anything. Wait.
You can
Download.
see the screen now. Let the person log out and log in.
No, it's only VS Code.
Please, what can you guys see at the moment?
Your VS.
Your browser. 127.0.0.1, your local browser.
And what can you see now?
VS Code.
Awesome. So I think we're good now. So I agree. I think the person should check out and log in again. Okay, awesome. So we'll just continue in the meanwhile. Okay, so I'm going to then introduce you to like different scenarios where you can really like have a. I think I would like to commit my change here. So what commit means is I'm saving my progress. I'm documenting my journey. As I'm making a little bit of progress, I document it, right? There are different ways we can, for VS Code, I can use the GUI here. I used the code the other time. I can come in to say, introduce a string function. With try and catch. So I just commit this. Because what I meant is that if I come to my browser here, my GitHub, and
Because if you are speaking, we can't hear you, except if I'm the only one.
Oh, I've been talking now. I didn't know you guys haven't been hearing me. Okay. Okay, you guys can hear me now. I didn't know I was on mute. For some weird reason. Okay, so now the different ways we can call this. This is scenario 1. I'm going to go to scenario 2 now. Now I'm going to comment out this very one here. Now, there are other ways again, like I said, that we can also make an active function. I just want to put this up there so that we can have it. Now again, if we remove this async array, how else can we make use of this without now waiting? We have something called .then, right? Now .then also only works in a promise. So promise is that every asynchronous function is a promise. Promise is that it promises to come back with a response. Now it could be a failure, could be a success, but there's a promise that we should wait and we're going to get a response. So essentially, if you have to wait for a call and get a response, I know at a much more later time, right? That very function is called a promise. So a promise is what we then use either an async and wait for, or we what's it called, or we use a .then for. So .then takes a parameter. I'm going to use an arrow function here of response. So you can say console.log res, right? If I come here, similar to what we got earlier on, we have with the body, also comes back with this very, very, very instant. Now, in case where I do .json here, now, very important. I want to show you this very, very what you call it, this very item which is pending. Pending is that this state is not yet resolved, right? And what that means is that we did not undo this request in a way that we did not wait for it. It's like we're calling it without waiting for it. This is exactly what happens when you call a promise and you don't either await it. Let's do this. I think I have something wrong. No. This right here is we're saying that, inside this our function of fetch here. Now, this our response is a function. It's a callback function, right? It means that as soon as this promise is resolved, right, in this .then, what action do we want to take? We'll put the function inside here, inside of the bracket. So technically, all our code lives inside this bracket like this. Now, there's also something called .catch here as well. And what this catch, what it gives you is the error scope. Similar to what we have. Now, this is a modernized way of writing writing an asynchronous function. So in this case now, what we had to do was, if we were to be going with this, what we'll do is we'll continue with this. Then for this very one here, we'll come here to then say we want to await response.json, because again, that is also an asynchronous function. Now I'm going to return this back to how it ought to be. Now I'm going to stick with this modern one. But again, this would work. So let's say we were to go with try and catch. It works, right? It's pretty much traditional. And if you look at this as well, also works. Only that we can take out this try and catch. We don't need to try and catch again, right? Because if you're using the .then approach, it means that you're already handling your error scenario. right? In what case do we then want to have a success and have a failure? So if I come here and I put this inside the dots, then, right? Inside here, that's success, don't forget. But I put this inside here, I have an error. That is our catch scope. And whenever an error occurs, we can even say we want to alert this. Right? I have an error. Don't let us populate this and say I have an error, right? Now, if I come here now, obviously it's a success scenario. So I cannot replicate a failure. So I just, put a wrong link there, right? You can see I have an error. That's because, and you immediately see the error that says that error name not resolved, meaning that this very link that we try accessing, did not resolve. It didn't come back as successful, more like you couldn't find it. Right. So let's go back to this scenario here. So what do we have? So to check your request a lot of time, you can come here to network, browser, come to users, you see the information about your request here, which is under headers, the link, the URL you tried calling, what the response is. We have 10 items here, which is 10 data, 10 users. The response, so you can get it in a stringified format as well. This is Muktar, which is initiator of how did the request take place, from what file to what line is what gives you, and time is just how long it took for the request to take. Now, what are the kind of error responses we get and codes? So we have so let me even go to responses. Request responses. So I'm going to use this to explain a bit. This is not really detailed, but essentially anything in the range of 200 is success. Anything in the range of 400 is more like 44 is not found. I'm sure you guys could have come across that. Anything in the range of 500 is more like a server error. But 200 is success. Either you are retrieving or you're creating, which is in the case of a 201. So by creating a new user, ideally the server will tell you 201, meaning that an item was created. But they could equally send 200 as well to let you know that they were just a general success. Right. Well, this is pretty not expected this to give you more detail in terms of that, but let's go straight into it. So request again is the request you're making, what we sent over. So what did we send over? We sent this URL. Sometimes it comes with payload as well. Payload is that you don't want to attach some extra items into it. So you're not just accessing this link, you're also submitting the data. In the case of a real scenario would be that you are submitting your username and password, right? Then the response is what comes back, which is this preview. This is what the server sent us. From this, again, don't forget we're using this test platform here. So now, what do I want to do with this data and where does Cypress come in? So what I want to do is I want to populate this screen with the result I get here. We don't even need everything. What we need is, let's say, I even have a table that shows the name of the user, the email, as well as the phone number, right? And how we're going to achieve that is we then come here. So as soon as we get our response, don't forget, at what point do we want to populate the screen? It is not, obviously, it is not when it fails. It is whenever it passes, whenever it is successful. That means it is inside here that we then populate. But again, I would not like to just dump my code inside here. I like to separate my code. So what I will do here is I'll come here again. I think we should take this away since we're done with the example. What I'm going to come is to write a function, right? And what do I want to call it? To populate users. Now, interestingly, I don't think we've done something around arguments and parameters. So what it essentially does is I want to immediately this thing gets successful. When it gets successful, I want to call this populate users. Don't forget the naming convention of my function are very precise, right? From the name, you already have an idea of what the function could be doing. And in short, we can even go forward to say populate users on screen. Let's call it on screen, right? So what does this take? We want to give it a parameter called users, meaning that we want to pass in users here. And what is users? right? Users, you can say constant users is equal to rest.json. Don't forget it's an asynchronous, so we say await, obviously. So let me take out this alert to console.log because that alert will just keep coming in. Await this users. In short, let me take this user to the top here. I have a success at the bottom. And I just want to say I have a success, users. So I want to log in my console every time I get this successful value. It means that this guy is still here from the last time. So it means that I shouldn't have an error again. Interestingly, we have an error. So let's see what our error is. Saying that failed to execute JSON on response for the streamer. Already read. Okay. Could it be? Okay, that's because we called this JSON twice. So let's remove that. So concentration is equals to, well, this right here is that's what a promise, right? So we also are waiting as we get the users. So you can see I have a success. We have 10 users. So we then come here to say that these users that we've stored in a video variable, we want to pass it to this function. So how do we know that this function is kicking in? We can also come here and say console.log, right? And say users gotten, right? And we say users as well. Don't forget, these users is same as these users here. In short, let's say so that it doesn't conform, we can call it my users. Meaning that we can call it anything, my users. It doesn't matter. The name here that we're passing here does not necessarily have to be the same. What's important is that the value of what users is being passed inside this function. So if I come here now on my screen, I can see I have a success, the amount of users. Then I come here and say users gotten, give me that same value, meaning that at this scope, we have access to our users. I know we've said a lot of things. I would like to take in questions and clarifications so that I can clear some ambiguities before going forward. What do you guys have for me? Anybody?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, me too. Hi.
Yes, I was still trying to catch up with you at the point you were using the try and catch error. Then when you now switched to the
New.
this newer approach, which is this catch error, which is actually looks shorter and smarter, but
Okay.
I think you're a little bit fast and I really didn't get it. Because I understand the concept of catch and what's it
I
called?
got.
Try and catch. It's for us to try to be the one defining what our error will be when we want it um, to be reported to users on the console. So if you can just make some more clarifications or explaining that aspect from where you introduced this newer method.
Okay, awesome. Do you want me to explain the previous one, or you already understand that, or you want me to explain the new one, the new approach?
I'm okay with try and catch. Is this new one so that we'll be able to continue then just to the point that you stopped?
Okay, good. So the difference between this try and catch and this new approach is that I'm trying to go with this because this is a new approach to how we handle promise today. Right. By default, right, to make a function a promise, you would have to add async behind this, right? As soon as you add async, it means that function is a promise. Well, in this new approach, you don't have to do that. What you have to do is you get your actual promise, what you would have naturally awaited. You just come at the end of it and add .then, right? Inside the .then, I'm going to comment out this. We have something called .then. No, the .then is also a what's it called? A function. That's why you have the parentheses. And what then does is that it means that after the promise, then run this action. Now, when you want to run an action, obviously that's a function. You want to run another function. So you can even come outside to declare a function and pass your function inside here. What that means is that when this is successful, I want this to then happen, right? But what if an error occurred while you were trying to make that request? Let's say the network, you lost your network or the server is down, then you then have .catch. Inside this catch here, you then have access to do your error. So you can then, tell the user there's an error getting your request, things like that. So that's the difference. And that is why this is however, I have to point out that there is no await here, meaning that you can run this simultaneously with any other thing. So while you're running your whole application, while something are running, this very approach can run. Remember that in the previous one, I said, when you await, everything beneath that await would have to wait for that response to come back. Right, but a lot of time, what if you are fetching like 17 at different times? Does that mean that every time you're making a request call, you would have to wait? Because some part of your screen might not even have loaded. So that's why this approach is much more sustainable when it comes to user experience nowadays. Because you want to show, as soon as the result is ready, you want to populate it on the screen. You don't have to wait for that request to come back before taking the next action. So that's why this then comes to play an important role, right? So that is the core difference between the two. Because even in this case, you can also still try your network call. You can also catch your error. And don't forget, like I said, inside each of them. So this is an arrow function. So even when I say that this is happening, there's something called an arrow function. Arrow function, and you can then have your similar to what we did here. This is an arrow function. So you could have even declare this outside and put your value inside there. For example, I could have said greet user. It works. It will work. Right? Don't forget, we're just bringing the value. That means anytime we run this, greet user will then kick in. Right? So that's the core difference between it. All right. Going forward, populate user on screen. We want to then take out all these our users and put it on screen. Now what I want us to declare a table here. Right? Table. The tables are in HTML. Like I said, we're not really going deep into it, but these are you declare a table. Those normal table that you see on your browsers today, these are you declared. We have something called table as a head. We have something called T head. That's the header. Inside the T head, we have a row called T row. So in each row, what do we want? We want a header. One is the name, right? Another is the email, right? Another is the company. Let's say phone number. I'm not sure we have access to. We have access to company. We have access to company. So you can check inside to say, okay, that's company actually. But I don't want to access this company is a what's it called? It's an object. Okay, let's say we have company, and we have phone. So that means we have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, and we've declared the head. So what we want to do? What's do we all want in the body? So we want T body. Inside each body, obviously, we want a row as well. Or maybe we should not even declare the row yet. However, don't forget that we introduced class and ID. Because this T body is going to be special to us, we want to call it an ID. An ID of users, let's call the users table. So now we've declared the structure of our HTML table. If you come in now, the only thing we'll find here is we can style it later, is our header. So inside here, we can then come here to say, now we want to target this. We want to target that very table. So we can come here to say constant T-body. So the T-body is equal to we can see query selector. I'm going to use different ones so that you know that we can use different approaches for this query. Okay, document dot query selector. You know, don't forget some. If you're using query selector, this is how you target an element. You can put an hash here because again it's an ID. So now we have access to our T-body. What do we want to do with our T-body? Again, to explain what I'm doing is that I want to populate a table with all of this information here. So that everything should appear. That's what I'm trying to do. So what my plan is that I'm going to target this T-body and inject everything inside as soon as that data is available. Right? So now I've grabbed that T-body here. What do I want to do with it? Right? First of all, so that there's no this, I'm first going to say T-body. T-body is equal to, okay, no, let's do the inner, there's something called inner HTML. And what that does is to set the HTML of the tag. So it means that if there's any ever a value inside of it, let's clear it first. We don't want to see anything inside of it. What that means is that if we have populated anything inside here, we should have deleted it. Because we don't want a mistake where there'll be something there, and because the primary data is what we want to populate it, right? So the next thing is that we want to then get each row. So this is where looping comes in, right? So before we introduce looping, I don't want to also commit my change that says switch to async stick to then catch promised, right? I also want to populate users. Say introduce, right? Introduce populate users. I commit my change again. Oh, let me undo that because I want to do beyond. I want to add everything, not just that one. So I'm doing that. So now we want to then have access to each item. It is not possible for us to just say because we've gotten users, let's just dump it on the screen. That will not work. We need to go inside each user, right, and do something with them. Now, how do you know when to loop something? You know that you have to loop something when you want to take an action on each item inside the list, which is in this case inside an array. Don't forget that if we look at this is an array. Now there's something called type of. If I come here to say type of we get you the data type of a value. If I come in, it tells us object. This is weird because we were expecting an array. Why is it telling us that it's an object? Don't forget, an object looks like this, right? An array looks like this. So why is it telling us an object? That's because JavaScript sees this data type of an array as an object. Now to know if something is an array, what we want to do is something called array dot is array. It's a function, so put that data inside the bracket, inside parentheses. I'm coming. So the return value is true or false, right? So if I come here to say, if I turn this to a string now, this was false, that this is not an array, right? So now that we know that for sure this is an array because we know what we're expecting, now we want to then say, want to again go inside the data, that is my users, to look through each of the item. And there are several ways we can do this. We can do a for loop, right? For loop, what it does is, this is one way you can iterate inside each item. We can use this to say, let's I, and this is syntax for it. The first one is the index, the starting index. The second one, you can look at this semicolon. What it does is to partition it, which is more like the full stop I mentioned in the earlier class. So you express this full stop, you express this another full stop, and this is the amount of time you want to take. So how many steps do you want to take inside of it? So you can say, oh, I'm starting from index 0. Don't forget, in the computing world, index starts from 0, not 1, right? There's even a meme I saw, and where the meme say where the engineer was telling the the girlfriend or the partner that, you're the number one person in my life, right? The lady felt good, but in his head, it says, aside my computer, which had the index of 0, right? So what he meant is that my computer comes before you, right? So indexing starts from 0. That means when you're counting from 1, 2, 3, in the normal world, you start from 1, but in computer, we start from 0. That's what we call the index. So we declare the index here. Now this array.length is the length. We don't even have to worry about that. Array.length, what it returns is the amount of items inside an array. And how many steps you want to count? You want to take each step. That means you want to go from number 1 to number 2. Now, if you wanted to jump 2 steps, there are different expressions for this. But for the sake of this very lesson, because of time, we're going to go into the loop straightforward. Now, I like to use modern way of doing things so that you're also exposed to like the different ways of doing things. We're going to also go into something called for each. So essentially, if we wanted to do this, what we would have done is would have then put our expression inside here. Now, instead of calling this an element, we'll call this a user. Now, this user, so array and index, don't forget that this is index 0, right? When we say array, which is in this case, in short, we don't need to call it array, we'll call it my users. For my users.length. Now, I here is less than my user.length. So if this is 10, right? Then the length of this is 10. Don't forget here, it's 10. So it means that this will run 10 times. This whole thing will run 10 times. And what loop means is that if I put a console.log here and say hello, this line 64 will not run until this loop is done. What that means is that everything we put inside between line 60 and 61 will run this amount of times before it goes to the next step. What that means is that this will run 10 times. Everything we put inside will run 10 times. So the good example is we're coming to say console.log hello. Let's put a string. Okay, I'm going to use the backtick here as we introduce the previous class. I'm going to say hello. User dot, I think we have dot name. Right? You can see. So let's put the index there. So I'm going to, again, in this case, I'm going to say I, which is the index. That's the position they are in. So in an array, if you have something called Chesley, what number does Chesley take inside the array? What index does it belong to? You can see 0, 1, 2, 3, like that. Obviously, it's going to be 9 because the first one has taken 0. So what we want to do in this case is I want the index plus 1. Right? What plus 1 is that because we want to get rid of that 0. It means that the first one will then start taking 1. Now, don't forget that we have this hello at the end. You notice that the hello did not run until after all of this run. Right? Which is a good progress. So we can come here to say, this is where we can now start populating each item. So what do you want to do? We want to create a row inside the table for each of these items. So we can come here to say constant row is equal to again. So don't forget now, because we don't have the element, we want to create element this around. We want to say create element, right? Inside a distance, what do we have? We call it a tr, that's a row, right? I want to create a row for each of these users. Inside each row, don't forget, we also want to create something called data. Right, let's call this data. Let's call it T data. So let's call this TR and let's call this TD. So this is called TD. Now, this TR, TD, they are not, I'm not just spinning them up. These are the name of actual attributes. In the same way I could have said create element TR or TH or table or a button. Or you could have, so it has to belong to an HTML attribute. That's for this item here. So now that we have our data and our so don't forget how many columns do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. It means that we are creating each item. So Sure, let's call this name TD. Name. So I'm going to come and say index. I'm going to reduce this a bit so I can look at. I'm opening it so that I can have access to this. So we want to call this. The first one is name TD. Second one is email TD. Third one is phone TD, and the last one is company TD. Right. I'm going to close this again for space. Now we've created all our table, all our data. So what do we want to do with them? Now, don't forget that the reason why we're having to create row data is because there's a certain way table has to be in HTML. Table, the head, inside the head, what do we want? A row, then table headers. Inside the body, ideally, if we're doing it manually, we would have done T body, which is similar to this T head, we would have a row inside it. Inside each row, we then have our data. But now that we have this data, again, what do we exactly want to do with it? I want to give each of them a value, right? Oh, don't mind my multi, don't let me do the shortcut so it doesn't confuse you guys. So we have name TD, we're going to then reference each of them. Then TD dot text content, which is the item inside that I want to put on the screen, is equal to, what do we want to give it? User dot name. Now, at this point in time, I expect that these variables here would have started storing the data. What we're doing is creating an element and giving it a value. We want to come here again and do the same, right? I'm just going to copy this and paste it here and just change it. Right? Email TD this time around. I want to call this user.email. I'm going to come here again, say phone TD is equal to name dot, I believe we have something called phone. Now, company TD, the same thing. We want to say company TD is equal to, don't forget. Now, we cannot just say company in this case because company is a whole object. I'm going to remove this. Where's the guy that's still here? Console.log. Loop. I'm going to comment this out so it doesn't. So you can say, if we look at company, let's open any one of them. Company is a whole object. It's not just a string that we can just get the data like that. Inside company, we have some other things, BS, catchphrase, name. So since, and don't forget that inside each array is an object as well. Each item in the array is an object. That's why I'm having to do this users dot, just like we did earlier on here as well, right? So in this case now, that's why we're accessing like that. So since company is also a data, it means that we have to do company dots as well. So in this case now, we're going for company dots, user.company dots user. Sorry, dot name rather. Now, we've stored this value here. Each variable here holds a contents. How do we inject it inside the page? They will not just automatically appear on the page. You've created it. You've given it a value. So what do you want to do with this value that you've created? Is to inject it inside the code, inside the page. Now, don't forget that we have zero. Now, we can come here to then say, what do we call this? We have tr dot append child. Append child means that we want to inside this row, we want to inject. What do we want to inject? It's a function. We want to inject name TD, right? So what this means is that this tr that we have here, we injected this name TD inside it. It means that you belong to tr as a child. Here as well, we want to do the same thing, which is email TD. Then we come here again to say, what's the next thing? Phone TD. And the next thing is company TD. Now, I mean, this row has been updated. Now, don't forget that this row should also belong to a child because we've created it as well, but we've not also done anything with it. And that is where this very T body comes in. this T body already exists on the page. If it didn't exist, if we didn't create it here, we would have targeted this table and injected this T body. But since we already have T body that is waiting for a value, we'll then say T body here. Now, for each T body, we want to insert a new row. So T body dot append child is the same thing we're going to use as well. What do we want to give it? CR. If you come back to our screen now, we can find everything all listed here. Now, it's a little bit ugly. I don't like it. Or just nothing fancy. We just want to make it, be in the middle. So I'm going to come here. Right. So if you come to our DOM, see, this is everything we injected. You can locally say, oh, inside each company, I don't even want your value to be the value again. I want to give you my own custom value. You can call it JS class. Now let's call this JS class. By the time we come here, everything becomes JS class because again, that's our custom value, but let's not be over ambitious. Let's give it the actual value. So now that we have this, I can come here to say weight equal to 60%, margin 0 auto, let's say 50 pixels, auto 0, 0. Okay, this will be auto as well. I can just say 50 auto actually, meaning that. So what they're telling me is that the top and bottom should be 50 pixels apart. Auto, left and right should be automatic. My 60% just. So I can come to our CSS here and say table, right? All tables that we have in our application. Take this, right? Maybe I liked it like this, and it's a little bit better than as well aligned. So again, we really don't even have the number to the left-hand side. So I think I want to do that, but let's again commit our change because we just made the progress. So we can say render users on screen. Then I commit again. I come back to app. I want to give it a number. I don't like the way it's just there because looking at it, I don't even know the amount of users I have. So I want to come here to add to this header and call this let's say serial number now, Abi. Then we have serial number, however, our table are scattered because now we have 5 columns. But HTML is not smart enough to know that it doesn't concern it however you place it. All it knows is that you have 5 headers. You have you don't have a matching body to it. So it means that our value here is missing something. Right? So let's create another one here called serial number TD. Serial number TD, right? And again, it's also a TD, but this time I want to give it a number. Automatically, I think it's just best that we use the serial number or the index in this case rather. So we can say I. Where is this I coming from? It's this I here that we declared, which is the index. So if I come here, right, and I do, obviously it doesn't even know where to inject it at. So we come here to say SN TD as well, TD. We're injecting it inside the row. And hold on. So there's already an error here. It says cannot access name TD before initialization. Name TD. Okay, that's because we're trying to call name TD. I duplicated the line. I now did name TD. So name TD does not exist yet. That's why this is happening. So because again, don't forget that this is equally brilliant. Our whole application is not branching. And why is it not crashing? That's because this error that is happening here, don't forget, everything is happening inside of this function, this request code that we did. So if an error happens here as well, this would catch it. You can see, I have an error. This guy is still recording. That means that this our catch block is working well because it even caught the error inside here. So, and essentially, if any error happens inside of here as well, this would catch it, right? We do not need this. Okay, so in this one, when you're doing a fetch with this new approach as well, you do not need to store it in a variable because you never use it, because it doesn't return, right? You can do some complicated thing and return here, but it's really not the standard. So the promise is not tied to anything. It just happens instantly on its own case. So now we have an error. Why is it happening? That's because we need to change this to SNTD. If we then come here, we then look at this. But it starts from 0, 1, 2, 3. If a user sees it, they'll be confused as to why a number is having 0. Now, programmatically, we know that that's what's happening, but our users don't care about that, which is why we have to add the +1 here. So then come here, this then changes back to 1, 2, 3, as the case may be, right to 10. So this is successfully populated. So I'm going to come here and say add serial number to table. But again, another progress that we just did. Now, this is everything around our target as regards APIs. We've talked about APIs, requests, responses. What can we do with these responses? How do we render them on the screen? So we can then go into Cypress now. I know time is a bit against us. We have like just 15 minutes more. And I'm going to just race through this Cypress very briefly, right? And but any questions so far before we go into Cypress, and I can address it right before we start. Any question, anyone? Or if you need me to clarify anything. Okay, so I'll take that as one question. So we'll go straight into Cypress. So how do we initiate Cypress? So I'm doing a Control J or Command J on my keyboard here. So it brings me right to this terminal. The terminal might not be like this, so you have to locate your terminal here, but you definitely find it. Right? So this is a bit, we'll take this a bit forward by introducing what we call Node. So Node is a framework of JavaScript. I don't even like to call it framework, I like to call it a library. You can arrange your project better, your folders, your packaging. You can introduce packages into your project. This is where because for us to use Cypress, I want us to just take the thing a step further, just a bit, right? So now I want to do npm. So to have npm installed on your computer or to be able to use it, you would have to install something called Node, right? Node.js download. So when you download this, you install it as usual, your next, finish. You don't need to do any setting. So when you install it automatically, you would have Node. So when you install it, you can you can type node -v. What that tells you is that you're trying to take the Node version that you have installed. I have version 23.11 installed. So what would have naturally happened is that the corresponding npm would have been automatically installed for you. So if I do npm -v as well, I get that means 10.92 is what is tied with version 23.11.0. So what I want to do here is I want to initiate an npm project. I want to turn this my project into it's not even compulsory we do that, right? But it's compulsory because we need Cypress. So npm run. No, let me install. You can write npm install, but you can even put just I. So again, I want to install Cypress inside our project. I click on enter, Cypress installed. Let's wait for it. This is network based, by the way, so it's going through the network to the internet to install Cypress for us. Awesome. So, we've come to a project now, right? Because we run an npm script. We have this things that have been introduced. We have node modules, package.log, package.json. What this does is to help you manage the packages or the libraries you've added to your project. But this node module has made our change become 6,000 plus. So we don't want Git to be monitoring our node modules for us. So we have to create a file called .git ignore. Did I spell that right? I think so. Awesome, I did. So what Git ignore does is that we want to ignore some file. We don't want Git to track some certain files and folder. First on the list, obviously, is node modules. By telling Git, please don't track our node modules folder, right? Immediately, it respects that and tells and just acknowledges and it doesn't track it. So we have to comment to say introduce ignore that's correct. Also, because we introduced the package, we said install Cypress. Again, we commit that. So now we can ignore the git ignore. What do we want to do here? We want to create a new folder, our Cypress folder. So I'd like to create a new folder here. I want to call it Cypress. Cypress. I want a folder called E to E, that end to end. Okay, let's have that. What's the name of our file I want to test? Let's call it API. API. What do I call it? Let's call it API test.cy.js. Now, because we installed Cypress, Cypress is smart enough to detect this because we put us right to detect it as a Cypress file, and that means it contains our test script. So what's the first thing I want to test with this? In short, let's even rename it. Let's be very specific to say, let's call it users table.cy.js. Now, what are the things we want to test for? Don't forget that we have like different items here. Again, everything would always have its own syntax and how to test this thing. So in Cypress, we have no. Okay, no, let me just describe, right? So one of the things I'm going to try this method of this where if it doesn't work, we'll then switch to the ES module syntax. But essentially, right? So if you want to describe something, right? What test do we want to describe? What do we want to achieve with this? Now, this text in the first parameter here is what is the name of the test we want to do? The test is we want to describe, user table. Let's call it test, right? And what is our function I want to run here? Again, arrow function, very important. Now, we cannot go ahead to write our test cases. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want you to visit. I want you to first of all come and visit this. I want you to visit this link. I like this link here. So let's visit it. Again, don't forget this is end to end. So what end to end means is that you can jump from one page to another. You can use this Cypress to visit a particular page. Within your app, you go to another page, you take an action, you click a button, you can navigate from one place to another, right? So which is why we're using the end-to-end approach. And which is why, again, we want to, that before we land on that page, we want to visit the page where our screen is. So before each test in this very description that we have here, again, another arrow function, what we want to do is we have CY, and my Cypress is not giving me joy here, and that's because we have something called CUI. from Cypress. Now, if we look at our package, we have Cypress installed into version 5.14.5.4, right? And it's in our dependencies here. So which is where I could come in to say I want to import CY from Cypress. Now this name obviously has to match with this. Now, if I come here and I press Control or Command on my keyboard and I click here, it takes me to the package. But again, you don't need to even touch anything here. You don't need to do anything here, just to show that this thing exists, right? If you press Control and you put your mouse on it, it tells you Cypress. If this kind of information does not show up, it means that it is not running, or it's not successfully installed. Obviously, because we ran that, it also gave us a success to say that npm install Cypress added 177 packages. You don't need to worry about all this information, just that this was successful, right? So again, before each of these tests that we want to run, please, first of all, visit, and it's called cy.visit, right? We want to visit this, our link here, right? Now, when you visit it, don't forget, after it is 127.0.0.1. Obviously, this has to be running on your local host. You can also change this to whatever your own link is. This is what is in my own address bar, right? And that's what we have here. So after each visit, we can then go ahead to start our test. Now, there's something called it. What should you do? Right, when you get to the page, don't forget, I like to only look at it from the perspective of what you want to achieve before writing anything. We want to make sure that it loads, let's say, users and populates the table, right? Let's say load users and populate the table. Forgive my spelling here. Table, right? Now, when it does this, what function do we want to run? Again, an arrow function. There's something called cy.interpret. That's better, right? So first of all, perform a GET request. Make your own request on your own end. So that's URL that we did before, which is this URL that we visited. Right? This URL, we want to take the same URL, right? We want you to go to perform a GET request. Obviously, if you're doing a post request or any type of request, you want to change this. Right, so in APIs, again, I think I missed that. There are different kind of requests. We have GET request, post request, delete request. So all of this patch request, and even put request. So GET is for getting an item. You don't necessarily pass the payload. So when you want to get these users, you notice that we just did a GET request to it straight up, right? Now, if you want to do a post request, where your post is like GET, only that you're also submitting an extra data, which is in terms of username and password, right? Put is that you're making a request to a server to edit an item. Your username, all those things, that's what put request comes for. Delete is that you want to delete a record. But in this case now, what we wanted to do is to do a GET request. And for each of this, when it does a GET request, what we want to do is we want to okay. No, I think we should ascribe this. So once say we want to dot as promise. We want you to see why dot, wait. Now, again, we'll put in a string at here, this get users. We want you to do your own fetch yourself and also wait for your results. Now, when you do your results, when you wait, there are certain things we don't want you to watch out for. Now, you should be able to see right on that page. You should be able to see don't forget, we have a table called user table here, but so in the case where after getting this, you then come here to say, wanted to get something, right? Wanted to watch out for an ID called, I was trying to copy this, then we wanted to look for this ID on the whole page, right? And find inside of it, wanted to find an element called tr. Don't forget, in the original write-up, we have no tr inside of it. So it means that at the stage after getting these results, tr must have existed, right? And what do we want? We want it should the length of this must, let's check out for the length. This must have a length of 10, obviously, right? Length must be 10. That means if you count the amount of rows inside it, it must be 10. And obviously that's a little bit aligns with what we expect, because the length of our users is 10 and all. So this is our first time running Cypress. We have to run npx Cypress open. So let's wait for it to come up. Okay, so it's when you run that this comes up, right? It tells you the version you have here. So we're not running component test. Component test is just contained within either a certain button or a certain page or a certain widget. But we're running end-to-end. So let's go for end-to-end. Why is it falling fast your project? Okay, so let me run through that again. So the first thing we did was to run this npx Cypress open. Again, what that does is to bring up Cypress interface here. Then what it does is to set up Cypress for the first time, and then open up your browser. Gives you the spot to run your file at. Now, the first thing I expect it to do is to detect all the test files we have inside of here. The last time it was updated, and again, we don't have our results inside of here. But again, that means our Cypress has been installed correctly. It can detect our files and the test files we've written. So when it tries to run these very tests, what it does will obviously just to click here. When you click there, what it does is to start running your tests, right? This is what comes up ideally in this is its own browser, more like a bot. And what it does is to start taking an action into, you can see this line here. What this line is doing here is to start with this file and gives you all the logs necessary. But we have a scenario here where we have a test. And the first thing we want to do, where is it? Yeah. I'm going to clear this. I'm going to clear this. You know what? Let me put some space here. Then we run the test again. Let me minimize the Eclipse coming up. So we want to run the test on this user table. Now, you have seen there's a reference. I mean that we're trying to call something, but it's not working right. So you say that the following errors are generated from your test code, not from Cypress. Process is not defined. Now, this process.env is when we are trying to call an env, but that's very strange because we don't have any EMV in our project. So this is definitely an error from our node modules and our definition. Now, you've noticed that this also tries to tell you where exactly it's coming from. Right, so you look at this node modules now. Obviously, the folder looks familiar, which is our node modules here. So instead of node modules, it's trying to look for going to this folder and check a particular variable. But this right here is not, it's not even if I want to touch at all. That's this node module here. For any reason, you are not touching anything here because these are the details or items that makes up your package or different packages that you have. And a lot of time you do not need to touch it. There's no reason why you should. Now, why is this running? I believe this degenerates from how we installed our package precisely. So what I want to do now is, again, so when you run through errors, there are three ways to always fix errors. The first item is that you read through the message or through the lines of code or line of errors. If you don't not get your answer or your resolution, you research the error avoid. In most cases, you would resolve your error from there. And if that doesn't work again, like I said, you reach out to a code developer to resolve your issues for you. But in this case, we're reading through the error. I know the error for sure is coming from the node modules. The next thing I don't want to do is, take this error precisely, right? Perhaps we did something wrong in our solution. I'm going to copy this and just go to Google and paste it. Let me use the other tab. So let's see, we'll know the find some indicator development. Okay, so it's profiling that we take this approach and try to use this approach, right? Okay, so this command and this usages of this starts from exactly how we installed it. Because ideally what we would have done is in a typical use case, we would be starting Cypress on a standard node project, right? On a node project, a lot of things are set up right on the fly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this resolution here and read through 0 code to say no project global node project. Yes, in a Node.js, which has a typical, it's not a typical Node.js app. So there are direct node imports where we did this. So what I also want to do for sure is so I want to see if our CY has a value to start with, right? What happens when we try to access the value of CY and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I can't hear you clearly. Oh.
You cannot hear me? No, I wasn't talking actually.
All right, sir.
No, I wasn't talking. I was trying to read it through the documentation um, to say exactly where I could have made a mistake. Mhm. It should even be harsh. Okay. So, like I suspected, the issue was around how we installed it, which is around this. So we're not supposed to import here. I'd like to see my log actually. Okay. All right. So interpret. This is wrong. Okay. Anyways, so let's complete a bit. Okay. So the issue was around how we install this and using the import because this is not a typical Node.js, like I said. Now, we can look through our test. What's the first one we said? All right. The first one we wanted was to load users and populate the table. Right? If you go through that, don't forget that's the whole body of everything. So we come here, we say, after visiting the page, which is this visit here, we wanted to load the users table and populate the table. Now, this screen that we see here is not the same thing as what we have here. It's not the same thing as what we have here. This is our own version. This is Cypress itself taking a step to render the page by itself. This is the URL we give it. Just like we had said in our code, we told you to visit that URL. It should load the users table. It should go through this endpoint. It should then store its function as get users. Now it should wait for get users. Then it should, after waiting, when the response comes back, it should look for an ID called users table. Inside that place, inside that very element, look for TR. The number of that TR should be 10. Now, by the time we come here, we notice the step it took in testing, which is, for example, the route it went to get the data itself. You can see what's the alias we gave it, get users. Now, inside this route, after the route, before each of them, obviously, before each of them, it visited this very page. If you put your mouse on it, it shows you the progress at that stage. So when you put your mouse here, obviously everything is loaded at that point in time. When you put your mouse on this very one, what was the situation before even populating the page at all? This is what you got. Now, after populating the page from this link, then loaded the page. Now, on the test body, notice I waited for get users. After getting the user declaration, then went to look for TR, whose length is 10. Now, what if we come here to say the length should be, let's say 11, right? Then comes there, does the same thing, waits for it, runs its test, and tells you that there's a failure. And in this case, again, it tells you that as that expected, right, to have a length of 11, which is what we expect to have here. However, it's got 10, meaning that our test has failed. So in the case where you're testing on the UI, this is the approach you take to test to check for the length. Now, there are several ways we can test. There are different things we can also test for, right? But because of time, right, I would allow you guys to ask your questions, clarifications. If there's anything you want us to specifically test for as well, you can mention it. We can make use of this very short window to carry out more tests. But I want to prioritize the questions first before even taking on more tests, if there's any. So guys, the floor is opened. We've been able to cover the API requests, responses, populating the screen, using Cypress to test. So what are your questions to this? What doesn't make sense to you? What is that? There's no stupid question, by the way, right? No matter how small or how big the question is, throw it to me so that I can help you clarify and help you understand these things better. Should I take that as no question? Should you have a question as well, you can also raise up your hand. I will take it number by number in the order which the answer are raised. If you're lower, do you want to go first? Okay, so I'll take that everybody understood exactly what I've explained so far then. I think a copy of this would be uploaded as well. So should in case you guys want to take a recap at it, you can always do that. But in my experience, nothing beats answering your life questions as you have it, or as it's disturbing your brain to move forward in your understanding. All right. Thank you very much for your time, guys. I know this took longer than we planned, but I hope you guys had a very, very insightful and educating time. This will bring us to the end of the class as a whole, and I would love to show you guys an assignment, a follow-up assignment to brush up you guys lesson so far. I'll pass my instructions through Adenike. You guys can have a Git profile also already up, and also just send me the repo link so that I can review it, and I can also give you my 2 cents on what you can do better and how you can achieve all of these things way better as well. I see some hands up. This hand is the first